Myra had learned them younger than most, because she had come to the palace at 11 years old with a bundle of clothes and a letter of recommendation from the village headman, and invisibility was the first lesson the head housekeeper had taught her. Move quietly, keep your eyes down, answer when spoken to and not before, never be in a room when you are not needed, and when you are needed, be so efficient that the people you serve forget you were there at all. She had followed these rules for 6 years. She was very good at them. The Palace of Valdenmere was enormous 47 rooms on the upper floors alone, 3 formal dining halls, a library that took up the entire east wing, and gardens that required 12 full-time gardeners to maintain. Myra knew every corridor, every back staircase, every door that stuck in wet weather, and every floorboard that creaked after midnight. She knew which rooms the nobles preferred and which ones they avoided, which fires needed banking at dusk, and which ones burned through the night. She knew the palace the way you know a place, when you have cleaned every inch of it with your own hands. What she had not expected to know, what she had carefully, deliberately, systematically avoided knowing, was anything about the Crown Prince. This was not an accident, it was policy. The Crown Prince was the most dangerous thing in the palace for a servant girl to have feelings about, and Myra had known this since she was 11 years old and had watched 2 other girls from her intake lose their positions over exactly that mistake. She had filed it under things that do not concern me and had maintained that filing system for 6 years without a single breach. She had seen him, of course. You could not work in the palace and avoid seeing the Crown Prince. He was 24, which was 4 years older than her, and he moved through the palace with the particular ease of someone who had never once in his life had to wonder whether he belonged somewhere. He had golden skin and dark hair and amber eyes that she had noticed exactly once, from a respectful distance, and had then filed under the same category as everything else about him. The system had worked perfectly for 6 years. It stopped working on a Thursday morning in early spring, in the east corridor on the 2nd floor, when she rounded a corner with a stack of freshly laundered linens and walked directly into the Crown Prince of Valdenmere. The linens went everywhere. She dropped to her knees immediately, not from the impact, but from training, the automatic response of 6 years of practice, and began gathering them from the floor as fast as her hands would move, face down, heart going entirely too fast. Myra, I'm so sorry, Your Highness. I apologize. I wasn't watching where I was going. I'm so sorry. She was talking too fast. She knew she was talking too fast. She couldn't stop. He crouched down beside her. She registered this with the peripheral vision she had developed over 6 years of keeping her eyes down the golden skin of his hands, gathering linens from the corridor floor, and stacking them carefully. She went completely still. Kale, you dropped this one. He held out a folded sheet. She took it without looking up. Her hands were not entirely steady. Kale, are you hurt? Myra, no, Your Highness, I'm fine. I'm very sorry. Kale, you've said sorry 4 times. Once was sufficient. She looked up before she could stop herself. Amber eyes, close enough to see the actual color of them, not the amber she had clocked from a distance, but something more complex, layered, warm in a way she had not predicted from the composed public face. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read, not annoyed, not dismissive, something more like interested, the way you look at something that has caught your attention without meaning to. She looked back down immediately. Myra, sorry, Your Highness. She heard something that might have been the beginning of a laugh, quickly controlled. He stood, she stood, the linens gathered and pressed herself to the wall to let him pass. He passed. She did not look up. She stood in the corridor for a moment after he had gone, holding her stack of linens, her heart still going too fast, and gave herself a very firm internal lecture about the filing system and why it existed. The lecture was not as effective as usual. She saw him again the next day. This was not unusual. She had always seen him regularly in the course of her work. What was unusual was that he saw her back. She was in the main corridor outside the formal dining room, polishing the silver candelabras that lined the wall, careful, methodical work that required both hands and most of her attention. She heard footsteps and registered them as the Crown Prince's without looking up, because she had learned every footfall in the palace, and his were distinctive, unhurried, even with the particular rhythm of someone who had never needed to hurry. She kept her eyes on the candelabra. He slowed. She was aware of this with every nerve in her body, while showing none of it on her face or in her hands, which continued their steady polishing motion without trembling, which she considered a significant personal achievement. He did not stop. He slowed, and then he kept walking, and she heard his footsteps continue down the corridor and turn the corner. She let out a breath. It happened again the day after that, and the day after that. Not every time, not so regularly that she could predict it or prepare for it, but often enough that she began to be aware of it as a pattern. The Crown Prince, who had walked these corridors every day for 24 years without appearing to notice the staff, had begun to notice her. She did not know what to do with this information, so she did what she always did with information she did not know what to do with. She filed it carefully and tried to behave as if it wasn't there. This strategy was significantly undermined on the 7th day, when he stopped. She was in the library, the East Wing Library, the big one, returning books to their shelves. It was early morning, before most of the palace was awake, which was her favorite time to be in the library because it was quiet and smelled of old paper, and she could sometimes, if she was very efficient with the shelving, steal 10 minutes to read. She was on the 3rd shelf of the history section when she heard the door. She came down the ladder immediately and turned to find him standing in the doorway of the library, looking at her with those amber eyes and an expression that suggested he had not entirely expected to find someone there. "Kale, the library doesn't open for another 2 hours. Mira, I'm returning books, Your Highness. I'll be finished shortly." He came in anyway. She kept her eyes on the book in her hands and moved to the next shelf. He did not leave. She could hear him somewhere behind her, not close, not threatening, just present, moving through the library the way he moved through everything, with that unhurried ease. After a few minutes, she heard him say, from somewhere near the window, "Kales, you were reading." It was not a question. "Mira, I was shelving books, Your Highness." "Kale, you were shelving books, and before that you were reading. The one in your left hand, you've read it before. You opened it directly to page 47 without checking the contents page." She looked at the book in her left hand. She had indeed opened it to page 47, because page 47 was where the chapter on the Eastern River Systems began, and she had been in the middle of it last week and had not finished. She looked up at him. He was standing by the window with the morning light behind him, watching her with that expression she still couldn't name. "Mira, I apologize, Your Highness. I shouldn't be reading the palace books without permission. It won't happen again." "Kale, I didn't say it was a problem." A pause. "Kale, what are you reading about?" She looked at him for a moment. He seemed to be asking genuinely. That was unexpected. "Mira, the Eastern River Systems, Your Highness. The way they changed course after the floods of the 4th century. I find it interesting how much the landscape changes when the water moves." She stopped herself. She was talking too much. Servants did not lecture the Crown Prince about river systems. But he was looking at her with full attention, the kind of attention that was not polite or performative, but genuinely engaged, and he said, "Kale, the western branch, rejoined the main river 60 years later. Most people don't know that. It's in the appendix of Volume 3. She stared at him. "Mira, I didn't know that." "Kale, Volume 3 is on the top shelf. The spine is faded. You'd miss it if you didn't know it was there." He left the library. She stood holding her book for a long moment. Then she went and found Volume 3. The head housekeeper's name was Madame Voss, and she had been running the domestic staff of Valdenmere Palace for 31 years, and in that time she had seen everything. Or so she told Mira. On the morning she called her into the small office off the servants' corridor and closed the door with the particular quiet that meant the conversation was serious. "Madame Voss, you're a good worker, Mira. You've always been a good worker. In 6 years I have never had to correct you on anything significant." "Mira, thank you, Madame." "Madame Voss, I'm not complimenting you. I'm reminding you of what you have and what it's worth. A good position in this palace is not easy to come by, and it is very easy to lose." Mira kept her face neutral. She was very good at keeping her face neutral. "Madame Voss, the Crown Prince has been seen speaking to you on 3 occasions in the past 2 weeks." "Mira, he spoke to me, Madame," I answered appropriately. "Madame Voss, I don't doubt it. That is not the concern. The concern is that he spoke to you at all, and more than once, and that the wrong people will notice and draw the wrong conclusions, and your position here will become complicated." Mira understood what she was not saying. She had understood it before she walked into the office. Myra, I understand, madame. Madame Voss, do you? Myra, I know what I am and what he is and what the difference means. I have always known. Madame Voss looked at her for a long moment with the eyes of someone who had seen 31 years of this palace and knew when someone was telling the truth. Madame Voss, good, then we understand each other. Myra went back to work. She moved through her afternoon duties with the same quiet efficiency. She always had the right rooms, the right sequence, eyes down, movements economical. She understood the rules. She had always understood the rules. The rules were not unkind, they were simply honest about the shape of the world, and Myra had no patience for pretending the world was a different shape than it was. She was a servant girl with red hair and a letter of recommendation from a village headman. He was the Crown Prince of Valdenmere with the weight of a kingdom behind his name. The distance between those two things was not a distance you crossed. It was a distance you respected, because respecting it was the only thing that kept everyone safe. She knew all of this. She went back to the library the next morning anyway, because Volume 3 was still on the top shelf and she had not finished the appendix. He was already there. They did not discuss it. She took Volume 3 from the top shelf. He was reading something at the large table by the window. She took her usual position at the reading shelf near the history section. They read in the same room in the same silence for 40 minutes until the palace began to wake up and she had to go. She did not look at him when she left, but she heard him say, very quietly as she reached the door, "Kale, the appendix continues in Volume 4. She left without responding, but she was smiling before she reached the corridor, and she was very glad no one was there to see it. The Crown Prince of Valdenmere had been raised to observe. It was the first and most important lesson his father had taught him, not strategy, not diplomacy, not the management of a kingdom. Observation, the ability to look at a room and understand it fully before anyone in the room understood that they were being read. Kale had taken to this lesson naturally, because he had discovered young that observation was the only form of privacy available to someone in his position. He could not go anywhere without being watched. He could not say anything without it being analyzed. He could not have a feeling without someone attempting to use it. But he could watch quietly, from whatever distance was available, and in the watching, he could know things that no one knew he knew. He had been watching the palace staff for years, not individually, not with attention, not with interest, the way you watch weather or architecture, background awareness. He had noticed her the way you notice a particular tree when the light hits it differently than the others. It had started before the corridor collision. He could trace it back, when he thought about it, to a morning 3 months earlier when he had been walking the east wing at dawn and had seen her in the garden below, collecting cut flowers for the morning arrangements. She had been talking to the flowers, not in a whimsical way, in a specific, practical way, as if she was sorting through them and making decisions out loud. He had stopped walking and watched for a moment with the specific attention of someone who has encountered something unexpected. He had filed it and continued walking. But he had noticed her after that. The same way you notice a word once you have learned it, suddenly it appears everywhere. The way she moved through the palace, quiet and quick, and with a competence that was entirely unself-conscious. The way she looked at things, really looked, with the same quality of attention he recognized from his own habit. The way she was in the library, when she thought no one was watching, with the book open and her whole face different than it was anywhere else. Alive in a way that the palace seemed to have taught her to keep covered. He had not meant for it to become what it became. He had not meant to slow down in the corridor, or stop in the library, or say anything about Volume 3 and its appendix. Those had been impulses rather than decisions, which was unusual for him. He was not a person who acted on impulses. He had learned very young that impulses were expensive. But there was something about her that made him want to. He searched for the right word and could not find one that was both accurate and acceptable. Something that made him want to be in the same room. Something that made the room feel different when she was in it. He was the Crown Prince of Valdenmere. He had responsibilities that weighed more than any single person. He had a political future that had been mapped before he was born, including a very specific expectation about the kind of woman he would eventually marry, which had nothing to do with red hair or green eyes or the way someone looked at a book about river systems. He knew all of this. He went to the library the next morning anyway. The library became theirs by default rather than design. Neither of them suggested it, neither of them acknowledged it directly. It simply happened morning after morning. In the 2 hours before the palace properly woke up, the same two people in the same large room, with the same quality of early light coming through the east windows. They talked about books. That was where it started, and for a long time it was where it stayed, the comfortable, relatively safe territory of things that had been written down by people who were not in this room. History mostly, geography, the sciences, which she knew more about than he had expected, and which she was careful at first to underplay. He noticed the underplaying. He didn't say anything about it for 3 weeks. Then one morning she made a point about irrigation systems that was not only correct, but demonstrated an understanding of hydraulics that had no business being in the head of a palace servant, and he said, "Kale, how do you know that?" "Mira, the library, Your Highness." "Kale, the library doesn't have texts on applied hydraulics." "Mira, the agricultural section. Volume 12 has a chapter on water management in the southern provinces. It's very detailed." He looked at her. "Kale, you've read the agricultural section." "Mira, I've read most of the library, Your Highness. I've been here 6 years." He was quiet for a moment. "Kale, you don't have to say Your Highness every time you speak to me." She looked at him with those green eyes, calm, careful, entirely aware of the weight of what he had just said. "Mira, I think I probably do." "Kale, we're the only 2 people in the library." "Mira, we are right now. That's not the same as always." He held her gaze, she held his. Neither of them looked away, which was itself a kind of conversation. Then she looked back at her book, he looked back at his. The morning continued. But after that the conversations shifted, not dramatically, not with announcement, but in the way that important things shifted when you were paying attention. They talked about more than books. She told him things about the village she had come from, not much, and always lightly, always as illustrations of something else rather than as personal disclosure. He listened with the attention she had come to recognize as his particular quality total, unhurried, taking everything in. He told her things too. This surprised her more. He was careful, more careful than she was, even in what he said was always chosen precisely. But he said things she suspected he did not say to many people, about the weight of the crown that was coming, about the particular loneliness of a position that required you to be always observed and never seen, about his father, whom he admired and found exhausting in equal measure. She listened. She did not offer comfort she didn't mean or advice she hadn't earned. She simply listened, which she had learned was the thing people needed most and offered least. On the morning he told her about the arranged marriage, the political alliance his father was negotiating with the Kingdom of Sel, the princess he had met twice and found pleasant and entirely remote, she was very quiet for a long time. "Mira, is it what you want?" "Kale, it's what's required." "Mira, that's not the same thing." "Kale, no, it isn't." They sat with that for a while. Outside the library windows the garden was coming into its spring color, the roses she had once talked to while he watched from above. "Mira, my mother used to say that required and wanted are 2 different gardens. You can tend both, but you have to know which one you're in." He looked at her. "Kale, which garden are you in?" She was quiet for a moment, then she closed her book. "Mira, I think I've been tending the required one for so long I've forgotten the other one exists." She stood and returned her book to the shelf and left. He sat in the library for a long time after, looking at the garden below the window. The spring banquet was the largest formal occasion of the Valdenmere calendar, 300 guests, 7 courses, an orchestra, and every member of the domestic staff working from dawn until well past midnight. Mira had worked it every year since she arrived. She was good at it. The controlled chaos of a large formal event suited her particular skills. She knew how to move through a crowded room without being seen, how to anticipate what was needed before it was asked for, how to manage the small disasters that inevitably occurred with 300 guests and 7 courses and an orchestra. What she had not previously had to manage was being in the same room as him in this context. He was at the head table, as he always was. She was moving through the room with a wine decanter, as she always did. These were their correct positions, and she had maintained them for 6 years without difficulty. The difficulty was that she now knew him. She knew the expression he was wearing, the formal public face, the composed and slightly distant prince, and she knew what was underneath it. And knowing what was underneath, it made the formal face feel like a mask in a way it never had before. She watched him make conversation with the Princess of Sel, who was sitting to his right and was indeed pleasant and remote, and she watched him listen with perfect courtesy and reveal absolutely nothing, and she understood every layer of that performance in a way she had no business understanding. She kept moving, wine decanter, correct posture, eyes at the professionally appropriate level. His eyes found her anyway. It was brief, a second, maybe two, across the length of the banquet hall, through 300 people and 7 courses, and the particular formality of the most significant social occasion of the palace year. His amber eyes found her green ones with the unerring accuracy of someone who knew exactly where to look. She looked away first. She had to. She kept moving through the room and did her job with the quiet efficiency that 6 years of practice had built, and she did not look at the head table again, and she told herself firmly that what she had felt when his eyes found hers was nothing, was manageable, was a thing she could file and forget. She did not entirely believe herself. It was after midnight when the banquet finally ended and the guests moved to the formal drawing rooms, and the staff began the long process of clearing and restoring the dining hall. Mira was in the kitchen corridor, carrying a stack of serving plates, when she heard footsteps behind her that she recognized without turning around. She kept walking. Kale Mira. She stopped, she turned. He was standing in the corridor in his formal banquet clothes, which was unusual. The Crown Prince did not come to the kitchen corridor. Mira, Your Highness, is there something you need? Kale, I wanted to make sure you were all right. She looked at him for a moment. The corridor was empty. The noise of the clearing operation was coming from the other direction. Mira, I'm perfectly all right, Your Highness. It's a long evening, but I'm used to it. Kale, that's not what I meant. She held his gaze. In the low light of the kitchen corridor, with the formal occasion over and the public face slightly loosened, his amber eyes were exactly what they were in the library, present and attentive, and carrying more than he was saying. Mira, I know what you meant, and I am all right. Kale, the Princess of Sel is. Mira, not my concern, Your Highness. She said it firmly, not unkindly. She did not want to be unkind to him. She found she was entirely incapable of wanting to be unkind to him, but with the clarity of someone drawing a line, they needed to exist. Mira, you should go back. Someone will notice you're gone. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, Kale, I notice when you're gone. She stood very still. Mira, Your Highness. Kale, my name is Kale. You've known it for months and you've never once used it. Mira, I know, there's a reason for that. Kale, I know there is. I'm asking you to tell me if the reason is the only reason. The corridor was very quiet. Somewhere further away, the clearing operation continued. The orchestra had stopped playing. She looked at him. His face was open in a way it was not allowed to be anywhere else in the palace, and she understood what it cost him to stand in a kitchen corridor and ask her that question, and she understood also that she could not give him the answer he was asking for. Not because it wasn't true, because it was. Mira, good night, Your Highness. She walked away. She did not look back. She did not sleep that night. The fire started in the west kitchen on a Wednesday evening. It was not a catastrophic fire, not the kind that destroyed things irreparably. It was the kind that started from an unattended stove and moved quickly to the dry goods storage before anyone noticed, and by the time the alarm was raised, it had taken hold of one wall and was making serious progress toward the second. Mira was the first person there. She had smelled it before the alarm, the specific wrong smell of something burning that should not be burning, and had run toward it rather than away, which was consistent with her general approach to problems. She had found 2 younger kitchen girls frozen in the doorway and had moved them physically out of the way, assessed the situation in approximately 3 seconds, and started giving instructions. She knew where the water reserves were. She knew where the fire suppression equipment was kept. She knew which doors to close to limit the airflow and which ones to open to allow the smoke out. She had read about fire management in the palace safety documents 2 years ago and had retained all of it because she retained most things she read. By the time the palace guard arrived with additional help, the fire was contained. Not out, that took another 20 minutes, but contained, which was the critical thing. She was standing in the kitchen corridor afterward, covered in ash and smelling strongly of smoke, when she heard running footsteps that she recognized. He came around the corner and stopped when he saw her. His face was, she had not seen that expression before. Not the public face, not the library face, not the kitchen corridor face. something rawer than any of those, the expression of someone who had heard something alarming and run toward it and found the specific person they were most alarmed about. Kale, are you hurt? Myra, I'm fine, it's out. No one was injured. He crossed the corridor. He stopped very close to her, closer than he had ever stood, and looked at her face as if checking the statement himself. Kale, you went in. Myra, someone had to. Kale, the guard. Myra was 3 minutes away. 3 minutes is a long time when something is burning. He looked at her, she looked back. She was tired and smelled of smoke, and there was ash on her hands, and her red hair had come half down from its pin, and he was looking at her as if none of that was what he was seeing. Kale, you could have been hurt. Myra, I wasn't. Kale, that's not the point. Myra, then what is the point? He looked at her for a moment that lasted considerably longer than a moment. Kale, the point is that I heard there was a fire, and the first thing I thought, the only thing I thought, was that you were in it, and I ran here, without thinking. That is not something I do. I always think before I act. It's been 31 days since I last acted without thinking, and that time it was also because of you. She stared at him. Myra, 31 days ago was the corridor, when we collided. Kale, I saw you coming. I could have moved. I didn't. The corridor was very quiet. Myra, you walked into me on purpose. Kale, I didn't plan it. It was an impulse. I told you I don't act on impulses. Myra, and yet. Kale, and yet. She looked at him, ash on her hands, smoke in the air, the palace settling back into its normal rhythms around them, the entire impossible distance between a servant girl and a crown prince sitting in the corridor between them, solid and real, and something she had been respecting for 6 years. She was very tired of the distance. Myra, this is Kale. She used his name. She heard herself use it. She saw what it did to his face when she did. Myra, this is very complicated. Kale, I know. Myra, I am a servant. You are the crown prince. That distance is real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. Kale, I know that too. Myra, then why are you standing in a kitchen corridor, telling me you walked into me on purpose? He looked at her with those amber eyes and said, with the precision he always brought to things that mattered. Kale, because I have been standing at the correct distance from the correct things my entire life, and I find that I am no longer willing to do it in this particular case. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, very carefully, Myra, the distance is still real. Kale, I know, I'm not asking you to pretend it isn't. I'm asking what we do with it. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she held out her ash-covered hand. He took it. The palace found out, as the palace always found out about everything, through the particular combination of observation and inference that 300 people living in close proximity inevitably produced. Nobody announced it. Nobody made a scene. It was simply known, in the way that things were known in the palace gradually, and then all at once, a shift in the quality of the attention in the room when both of them were in it. The reactions were varied. Madame Voss called Myra into the small office again. This time she did not sit down. Madame Voss, I told you. Myra, you did. Madame Voss, and. Myra, and you were right that it would become complicated. You were right about most of it. Madame Voss, but. Myra, but I find I am not willing to manage it the way you're about to suggest I manage it. Madame Voss looked at her for a long time, 31 years of the palace in her eyes, and underneath that something that was not entirely without sympathy. Madame Voss, you know how this ends, Myra. I have seen it before. Not with him, he's not that kind of man, and I've known him since he was a boy. But the kingdom has expectations. His father has expectations. The Princess of Cell has not been dismissed. Myra, I know. Madame Voss, then you know what you're risking. Myra, yes, I know exactly what I'm risking. I've thought about nothing else for 2 weeks. A long pause. Madame Voss, he's a good man, better than most in his position. That makes it worse, not better. Myra, I know that too. Madame Voss sat down. She looked at her desk for a moment. Madame Voss, your position here is safe. Whatever happens, I want you to know that. Myra looked at her. This was not what she had expected. Mira thanked you, madame. Madame Voss, don't thank me, just be careful. Kale's difficulty came from a different direction. His father did not call him in for a conversation. The king expressed his awareness of the situation in the way that kings expressed awareness of things they found inconvenient through a series of carefully chosen silences and redirections that were more pointed than any direct statement. The negotiations with Sel were accelerated. The princess was invited to extend her visit. 3 separate court functions were arranged at which Kale was expected to escort her. He did all of it. He was a good son and a thoughtful prince, and he understood the weight of the expectations he carried. He did not shirk any of it. And every morning before the palace woke, he was in the library. The morning he came to the library, looking the way he looked, she knew before he sat down that something had happened. He was not disheveled, he was never disheveled, but the quality of his composure was different, maintained rather than natural, the kind of stillness that was costing him something. She waited. Kale, my father has set a date for the formal announcement of the engagement to Sel. She absorbed that. Mira wins. Kale 3 weeks. She looked at the book in her hands. The words on the page were not registering. She set it down. Mira, you knew this was coming. Kale, yes. Mira, we both knew this was coming. Kale, yes. She stood and went to the window. The garden below was at its full spring height, the roses in full bloom, the grass impossibly green, everything exactly as it should be. She looked at it for a long moment. Mira, what do you want me to say? Kale, I don't want you to say anything. I want to know what you want. She turned from the window and looked at him. He was sitting at the table and looking at her with those amber eyes and the expression he had shown her in the kitchen corridor open, without the performance, carrying everything. Mira, what I want is not the relevant question, and you know that. Kale, I'm making it relevant. Mira, you can't just. Kale, Mira. Her name in his mouth, the way he said it, she had noticed from the beginning that he said her name differently from how anyone else said it, as if it was a word that mattered. Kale, I have spent my entire life doing what is required. I have done it willingly. I'm not asking for sympathy. I understood the position I was born into, and I have never resented it. But I have never once in 24 years been asked what I actually want, and I find that I know the answer and I don't know what to do with it. She looked at him. Mira, tell me. Kale, that is the answer. It has been the answer for a long time. I want to be in the same room as you. I want to talk to you about river systems and agricultural irrigation and your mother's 2 gardens. I want to be the person you stop being careful with. I want. He stopped. Kale, I want to stop watching you from the correct distance. The library was very quiet. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him. She looked at him, the Crown Prince of Valdenmere, with the weight of a kingdom behind his name, and 3 weeks until an engagement announcement, and amber eyes that had been watching her since a morning in the garden when she was talking to flowers. Mira, the distance is still real. Kale, I know. Mira, the engagement. Kale has not been announced yet. Mira, that's 3 weeks, not a solution. Kale, no, but it's 3 weeks in which I intend to speak to my father, properly, about what the engagement to Sel actually accomplishes and whether there are alternative means of accomplishing it. Mira, Kale. Kale, I am not asking you for a promise. I am not asking you to wait or to hope or to do anything that costs you something you're not willing to give. I am telling you what I intend to do. What happens after that is what happens after that. She looked at him for a long time. Then she did something she had not planned and could not have predicted. She reached up and put her hand on his face. Just for a moment, just for the specific weight of a hand on a face, the most ordinary and extraordinary gesture she could think of. He closed his eyes. Mira, then go talk to your father. He spoke to his father that afternoon. He had prepared for it carefully, not with arguments, because he had learned that arguments with his father were the wrong approach. His father was not a man who responded to being argued with. He had prepared with questions. Specific, considered questions about what the Sel alliance was actually meant to achieve and whether the mechanism of a formal engagement was the only way to achieve it. His father was a careful man and a good king, which were not always the same thing but were in his case. He listened to the questions with the attention of someone who had been a king for 26 years and had learned to hear what was not being said as clearly as what was. When Kale finished, his father was quiet for a long time. The king, this is about the girl. Kale, this is about whether the engagement to sell is the best mechanism for what we need, which is a legitimate question regardless of any other consideration. The king, it is, and the answer is no, it is not the only mechanism, it is the simplest one. Kale waited. The king, there is a trade agreement that would accomplish the same alliance without a marriage. I have considered it. I set it aside because the marriage seemed cleaner. Kale, it can be reconsidered. The king, most things can be reconsidered. A long pause. The king, tell me about her. Kale looked at his father. The king looked back with the eyes of a man who had watched his son for 24 years and knew him well enough to know when something was real. Kale, she reads everything in the library. She knows more about the eastern river systems than our best geographers. She ran toward a fire when everyone else ran away. She called me by my name once in a kitchen corridor, and I have thought about nothing else since. His father was quiet for a moment. The king, she is a servant. Kale, yes. The king, the court will have opinions. Kale, the court always has opinions. The king, this is not a small thing you are asking. Kale, I know, I am asking it anyway. His father stood. He walked to the window of his study and looked out at the kingdom below the city, the river, the roads that led out to every corner of Valdenmere. He stood there for a long time. The king, your mother was not who the court expected either. Kale went very still. The king, she was a scholar, nobody's first choice for a queen. The court had opinions for years. A pause. The king, she was the best decision I ever made. He turned from the window. The king, I will have the trade agreement with Cell revisited. The formal engagement announcement will be postponed. What you do with that time is your business. Kale stood. Kale's thank you, father. The king, don't thank me. Bring her to dinner. I want to meet the girl who knows more about river systems than our geographers. She was in the library when he found her. She was always in the library when he found her, which was something she suspected would remain true for the foreseeable future, and which she found she had entirely no objection to. He came in and stood in the doorway, the way he had stood in doorways before, but different now, without the careful distance, without the measured approach. He came in the way you come into a room where you are allowed to be. She looked up from her book. Kale, I spoke to my father. She set the book down. She looked at his face. She had learned to read his face very well over the months of early mornings, and what she saw on it now was something she had not seen before, a specific kind of lightness, the expression of someone who has been carrying something heavy and has been allowed, finally, to put it down. Mira ends. Kale, the engagement to Cell will not be announced. The alliance is being renegotiated through a trade agreement instead. She absorbed that. Mira, your father agreed. Kale, he told me to bring you to dinner. He wants to meet the girl who knows more about river systems than his geographers. She stared at him. Mira, I what? Kale, he wants to meet you. He was quite specific about it. She looked at the book in her lap. She looked at the library around her, the shelves she knew by heart, the east windows, the ladder she had climbed to reach volume 3 on that first morning, the room that had become the most important room in the palace for the most unexpected reason. Mira, I am still a servant girl. Kale, you are the most well-read person in this palace, including everyone with a title. You ran toward a fire when the palace guard was 3 minutes away. You told me things about river systems I didn't know, and I have been studying this kingdom for 24 years. Mira, that's not. Kale, Mira. She stopped. Kale, the world is not going to become simple. There will be opinions, there will be complications, there will be people in this palace who take a very long time to adjust to all of this. Mira, that's not exactly a compelling argument. Kale, no, but it's an honest one, and I thought you deserved honesty more than you deserved a story that pretended the complications weren't real. She looked at him, golden skin and dark hair and amber eyes that had been watching her for months from the distance he was no longer willing to keep. She thought about her mother's 2 gardens, the required one she had tended for 6 years, the other one she had almost forgotten existed. She stood up, she crossed the library. She stopped in front of him and looked up at him the way she had looked at him in the kitchen corridor, without the careful management, without the professional distance, with the full green-eyed attention she usually reserved for books she found particularly significant. Myra, I know the complications are real. I've been calculating them since the corridor. I know exactly what it costs, and I know exactly what it's worth, and I have decided that the second number is larger than the first. He looked at her. Kale, that's very precise. Myra, I'm a very precise person. Kale, I know. It's one of approximately 40 things I find remarkable about you. She laughed, startled out of her, real and sudden, the way the best laughter always was. He smiled, which was something she had seen exactly twice and intended to see considerably more of. He took her hand, not the ash-covered kitchen corridor version, just her hand, clean and warm. In the morning light of the library, they had made theirs by accident and kept by choice. Outside the window, the garden was in full bloom. The roses she had once talked to while someone watched from a window above, not yet knowing who was watching, not yet knowing what the watching meant. She knew now. She looked at him and he looked at her, and the library was full of books she had read and books she hadn't yet, and all the mornings that were still coming, and she thought, This is the other garden. And it turned out it had been growing all along.